Hello, I'm Matthew Shilvock, General Director of San Francisco Opera, and I'm so excited to announce our 101st season. It's a season that embodies the extraordinary and transformative music making of our music director, Eun Sun Kim, tells bold new stories, and welcomes people to discover the extraordinary impact of opera in innovative ways. I'm so excited for what lies ahead. The 2023-24 subscription season has three main focuses. First, three classic operas conducted by Eun Sun Kim, taking a journey through the musical language of these great composers, Verdi's Il Trovatore, Wagner's Lohengrin, and Mozart's The Magic Flute. Second, three new works, Mason Bates and Mark Campbell's The Revolution of Steve Jobs, Rhiannon Giddens and Michael Abel's Omar, and Kaija Saariaho and Sophie Oksanen's Innocence. And two works that speak to the lighter side of life, Donizetti's The Elixir of Love and Handel's Partenope, frothy escapades that will have you laughing in the aisles. Our season imagery is once again by local artist Brian Stauffer. Brian has an incredible way of finding the emotive core of these operas in a single image, and I love how he has captured this season's operas. So let's delve into the season in a little more detail. First, the three operas conducted by Eun Sun Kim. I caught up with Eun Sun in Europe a few weeks ago and asked her why the works of Verdi and Wagner are particularly important to her time as music director.
The works of Wagner and Verdi are cornerstones of the operatic repertoire as we know it. And each composer blazed new trails in his day, and each changed the world of opera forever. As music director, part of my work is to set priorities for orchestral collaboration that lead to the artistic growth of the company. And with this in mind, I'll program operas from these two giants every year, enabling continuous development of these musical styles and our shared craft.
Our first opera of the season is Verdi's middle period masterpiece, Il Trovatore. At the heart of Trovatore is a young woman, Leonora, who is being pursued by a count, but is in love with a traveling musician. Nobody knows that the two men are brothers, separated as babies after a horrific act. The opera courses with red-hot emotion through love, lust, betrayal, false identity, imprisonment, and murder. But at the core of it is, as with all great Verdi, the very human relationships between the characters, expressed in music of sublime beauty. This marks the first return of a San Francisco co-production, first seen in 2009, directed by Sir David McVicar and inspired by the imagery of Goya. It's an impressive production that carries us through the constantly shifting worlds of Trovatore, replete with the visceral energy of the anvils. Trovatore demands an exceptional cast, and I'm excited for our returning artists, Angel Blue as Leonora, Arturo Chacon Cruz as the troubadour Manrico, and Anita Rakvelishvili as Azucena. Also joining the cast is debuting Romanian baritone George Petean. Eun Sun's second opera of the season marks the beginning of her Wagner journey, and for that we go to one of his earlier operas, Lohengrin. Lohengrin is often regarded as Wagner's most Italianate opera, with clearly defined arias and duets, written at a time when Wagner was full of revolutionary zeal and before he discovered the nihilism of Nietzsche and the pessimism of Schopenhauer. The opera is about a young woman, Elsa, persecuted in a totalitarian society bent on accusing her without cause. She cries out for someone to fight on her behalf, and a knight appears, carried forth on a swan. He vows to protect her, but she can never ask his name. Elsa and our mystery knight marry, giving rise to the ubiquitously popular bridal march. But her curiosity grows, fed by the scheming of two antagonists. Ultimately, she cannot resist asking the forbidden question. It doesn't end well. Former Adler Fellow Julie Adams is Elsa, with another alumnus of the Merrill program, celebrated tenor Simon O'Neill in the title role. Brian Mulligan is Telramund, and his wife Ortrud is Romanian-Hungarian mezzo and debuting artist Judith Kutazi. Veteran Icelandic bass Kristen Sigmundsson is the king. This is the American premiere of a celebrated Royal Opera production by director David Alden, a production in which we feel the weight of society bearing down on Elsa, and a timely representation of a society bent on repression of individual liberty. Eun Sun's third opera of the season is her first Mozart with us in that most inspiring, uplifting opera, The Magic Flute, an apotheosis of Mozart's humanitarian principles. I cannot wait to hear this in the hands of Eun Sun. There is a gloriousness about her music making that will be particularly felt in the energy of Mozart's journey of heroism. The production is new to San Francisco, but is celebrated around the world. Australian director Barry Kosky is one of the foremost directors of our time, and his Magic Flute, created in collaboration with the theatre company 1927 and co-director Susan Andrade, is a fabulous homage to the 1920s silent film. It's a dreamscape, a fairy tale, a fantasy, and the animation gives unbridled possibility, making the Queen of the Night a huge spider and creating a world in which pink elephants fly. It's also a tight evening of theatre. The spoken dialogue is eliminated, using projections to fill in the gaps, so it whizzes along in a propulsive journey. Amitai Pati will be our hero Tamino, and Christina Ganch is our heroine Pamina. We then have three exciting house debuts: Estonian-based baritone Lori Vazar as the birdcatcher Papageno, Korean-based Kwang Chul-yun as Sarastro, and Polish soprano Anna Seminska as the stratospheric Queen of the Night. Let's now turn to our second group of operas, the new works. The 23-24 season has the highest ratio of new works in recent memory, 3 out of 8 subscription operas being co-commissions by San Francisco Opera, reflecting an important commitment to a diverse breadth of storytelling. The first of the new stories is Mason Bates and Mark Campbell's The Revolution of Steve Jobs. It's a co-commission with Santa Fe and Seattle Opera, with support from our friends at Cal Performances. The fundamental themes of the opera are particularly acute since lockdown, and our even greater reliance on technology and screens. The opera is a fragmented portrait of Steve Jobs, conceived more emotionally than biographically, focusing on the conflicting forces with which technology has changed our lives. With Jobs' wife, Laureen Powell Jobs, we see the tension of an extreme creative urgency set against the needs of family. We see the exuberance of his relationship with Steve Wozniak's Sauer as Jobs moves increasingly to the beat of his own drum, and the grounding spirituality of his mentor, Kobun Chino Otogawa, whose advocacy for simplicity finds resonance in both Jobs' life and his product design. The opera won the Grammy in 2019, and for good reason. Bay Area composer Mason Bates infuses classical lyricism with techno-electronica and the sounds of early computers to create an acoustic and digital soundscape perfectly suited to this story. The synthesis of live and digital is similarly found in the physical production. Director Kevin Newbury and 59 Productions have created a world in which advanced projection technology forms a kaleidoscope of worlds. The story of our next new opera, Omar, is a vitally important story for us to be telling on the Opera House stage. In 1807, a wealthy Islamic scholar, Omar ibn Said, aged 37, was captured in what is now Senegal and brought on a slave ship to Charleston, South Carolina. He ended up in Fayetteville, where he wrote some 14 manuscripts, including the only Arabic autobiography written by an enslaved person in the US. Omar's words are poignantly and powerfully captured in this opera, hailed by the New York Times as a sweeping achievement. The opera is by Rhiannon Giddens and Michael Abels. Rhiannon Giddens is an extraordinary artist, musician, singer, composer, actor, author, and historian. She has won both Grammy and MacArthur Awards and uses her art to excavate the past and reveal bold truths about our present. Her most recent album, They're Calling Me Home, won a Grammy and was hailed as a near-perfect album. She is joined by film composer Michael Abels, whose work includes the score for the Oscar-winning film Get Out. They have created a powerful score that propels us through time and place. Director Kaija Saariaho and her team have designed a world that transforms through fabric, text, and imagery, moving seamlessly from West Africa to North Carolina to a world of profound spiritualism. Omar began at the Spoleto Festival last summer, then went to LA Opera, where it enjoyed sold-out performances. And each time I've seen it, audiences have reacted so immediately, so powerfully. It's a story that goes deep into the soul and consciousness of America, told with a personal intimacy through words written down 200 years ago, and in a musical language that blends folk, bluegrass, jazz, spirituals, and West African traditions. The third of our new operas is actually the first new work I signed on to when I got this job in 2015. I was having dinner before Meistersinger here with Finnish composer Kaija Saariaho, one of the most important compositional voices of our time. I asked her what she was working on, and she told me she was just starting work on a piece called Innocence with librettist Sophie Oksanen. As she described the piece to me, I felt completely overtaken by emotion and an urgent need to bring it to San Francisco. We signed on as a co-commissioner, and at the premiere in Aix-en-Provence last summer, all of that emotional urgency came to the fore in what must be one of the great masterpieces of the 21st century. I don't want to go into too much detail about the story. It's written as something of an unfolding mystery in which we keep having the rug pulled from under us as we make assumptions about where innocence and guilt lie. It's a difficult subject, and one that shows a family trying to deal with a horrific tragedy. The opera begins 10 years after the tragedy in a wedding reception in which a waitress recognizes the family of the groom, bringing everything back to the fore. Ruxandra Denoz is the waitress, returning to San Francisco Opera after a gap of more than 20 years. Amongst the debuting artists are acclaimed American mezzo Lucy Shelton and Finnish folk artist Vilma Jahr, whose stratospheric technique is otherworldly and unlike anything I have ever experienced. Kaija Saariaho is a leading spectralist composer. She uses the harmonic and acoustic patterns of sound to inform composition, and in doing so creates sound worlds that have the ability to bend the very concept of time. The closest we've had to spectral writing on our stage is Messiaen's Saint-François d'Assise in 2002. Kaija creates music of extremes, from the spiritual and ethereal to the violently earthy. Her music is complemented powerfully by the production of Australian director Simon Stone, who creates a cinematic energy that keeps pulling us closer and closer into the truth. The piece is sung and spoken in 9 different languages, and is just one act. It's the kind of piece that leaves audiences completely speechless at the end. This promises to be a very important American premiere on our stage. I caught up with Kaija recently and asked her what it is about the operatic art form that makes it such a powerful medium.
I think it's because it's artwork where several arts encounter, and then I think it has very much to do with the story and text, because here we can identify with the people, or at least their feelings, and text and music together and these persons. I think it makes so many different communications links between arts, but also in our brain. The text can be very touching, the text and music and the way of expression, and then the whole theater aspect. I think that's the reason that I have continued writing operas.
And so on to our last 2 operas, some lighter fare to remind us that the opera stage reflects both the mask of tragedy and the mask of comedy. We'll bring the fall season to a close with Donizetti's effervescent comedy, The Elixir of Love, which in this production finds a lovesick waiter, Nemorino, trying to find the courage to ask out Adina, the owner of a 1950s hotel on the Italian Riviera. Adina is also being pursued by a bombastic naval officer, Belcore, who is definitely not short of courage. But when a quack doctor arrives in a hot air balloon and peddles an elixir that can solve all the maladies of the world, Nemorino is determined to acquire some. It will have been 15 years since we last had The Elixir of Love here, and this production is new to San Francisco by director Daniel Slater and designer Robert Innes Hopkins. Robert's designs for our new Traviata just wowed audiences here. Their Elixir is a colourful, heartfelt, and very funny production. It's the elixir of La Dolce Vita, and we have the perfect Nemorino who will captivate your hearts, Amitai Pati. Penne was recently named People's Choice Artist of the Year in the prestigious Opera Awards, and we know why with good reason from his many performances here. His Adina will be Slovakian soprano Slavka Zamechnikova, and Spanish conductor Ramon Tebar will be on the podium. Things are a little more complex in Handel's Partenope. As with Elixir, it's a story of a number of men vying for the hand of one woman, but we up the ante with no less than 4 suitors, one of whom turns out not to be quite as advertised. We're bringing back the award-winning, rip-roaring production that we first saw in 2014, directed by Christopher Alden, who incidentally is the twin brother of David Alden, director of Our Lohengrin. This production hails from English National Opera and perfectly captures the craziness of the story and the ebullience of Handel's music. It moves the story from antiquity to a 1920s Parisian salon in which Partenope is holding court with a group of surrealists. It's a production full of physical humor, cross-dressing, disguises, and unexpected revelations. And, as with Elixir, moments of exquisitely beautiful pathos that bring the comedy into stark relief. Christopher Moulds returns to the podium, last with us for Handel's Orlando. And in addition to the return of Daniela Mack, Alex Schrader, and Hadley Adams, we welcome 3 new friends to the company. French soprano Julie Fouch is the Queen Bee Partenope, and her suitors, countertenors Carlo Vistoli and Nicholas Tamagna. Partenope made such an impression first time around, and we're eager to bring it back. So 3 great classics, 3 new stories, and 2 comic gems, and it all begins on September 8th with Opera Ball, which this year features the superstar tenor Roberto Alagna and his wife, the equally talented soprano Alexandra Kurzak. This is the first time that we've been able to get Roberto Alagna to the War Memorial stage, so it should make for a particularly exciting start to our 101st season. I am in awe of the ability of the opera stage to transform into so many different worlds, and I'm excited by the variety of musical and visual aesthetics that await us in 23-24. And we still have 3 operas to round out the current centennial season this June: Die Frau ohne Schatten, a new production of Madame Butterfly, and the new opera El Último Sueño de Frida y Diego by Gabriela Elena Frank and Nilo Cruz. This kind of variety is only possible because of the role that our subscribers and our donors play, investing in the totality of the company, allowing us to be bold in our programming, and keeping this one of the great lyric stages in the world. As we fully enter our 2nd century, it's vital that we remain at the creative edge of opera, not only in the US, but around the world. In our main stage work, in our innovation programs, and in our community partnerships, we want to be a place where the whole community feels welcome and inspired to participate. The Centennial has shown with amazing energy what San Francisco Opera is capable of. I dearly hope that you'll join us as full subscribers for the whole 23-24 season and celebrate with us this extraordinary company, 100 years in the making and still bringing the most amazing stories to life today. Thank you for being a part of something so special.